Today's text is Exodus 14, 10 to 22. You can find it in the Pew Bibles on page 53. When we read Exodus 14, we're dropped into a moment of sheer terror and holy possibility. The Israelites, newly freed from slavery, stand on the shore of the Red Sea, hemmed in on all sides. Behind them, Pharaoh's army thunders toward them. Before them, a vast sea stretches out, a wall of impossibility. I invite you now to listen as I read. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone and let us serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward, but you lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites may go into the sea on dry ground. Then I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they may go in after them. And I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his chariot drivers. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained glory for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots and his chariot drivers." The angel of God who was going before the Israelite army moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel. And so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. One did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. May God add blessing and further understanding to this reading from His holy word. And now Susie is going to welcome our rabbi. Susie, thank you.
Excuse me. This morning we're blessed to have Rabbi Joshua Kalev of the congregation Tikvat Jacob Beth Torah, affectionately known as CTJ here in Manhattan Beach. Rabbi Kalev became CTJ's senior rabbi in the summer of 2016. He's a proud member of the South Bay Community Coalition Against Hate. Well, MBCC made CTJ's website as it cites, Rabbi Kalev has enjoyed a special relationship with the leadership at Manhattan Beach Community Church, teaching classes together and swapping pulpits. Many of us attended those classes, and we got to know the rabbi and heard his last message here. So we are so grateful to have him back in our pulpit. Let's thank God together for Rabbi Josh.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. And before I begin, I just want to tell you, last time I was here and we were swapping pulpits, as we were leaving, all my congregants said to me, "You spoke so long." And all of you from MBCC were so gracious and said, "That was so short." So hopefully I found the right balance this morning. I do want to warn you that this is going to be a selfish sermon because it's about the Jewish community and what we are facing. But I also think it can give a little insight into how we can handle difficulty and division. So I really wanted to share with you this morning. Our synagogue, CTJ, here in beautiful Manhattan Beach, spends $250,000 on armed security each year to ensure the safety and security of our members and the students that fill our building. It pains me that our doors have to be locked, that we have to be suspicious of guests who want to join us for services, and that you have to have your bag searched before you enter. That is not the world we envisioned for our community or our guests that come to our door. We wanted a world without hatred, without anti-Semitism, a world where Jews and all people could live freely and not be afraid. The Jewish people have fought for so much: civil rights and civil liberties. We built a culture of inclusion and acceptance that shamed prejudice and shunned discrimination. We dreamt that our children might be the first generation in our history that would never know a word of hate, a gesture of exclusion, never experienced a closed door, the spray-painted swastika, an anti-Semitic slur. And we believed it was possible because America is different from all the lands and cultures we lived in during the millennia of our Jewish diaspora. America's core narrative is our master story, taken from the Bible. We escaped tyranny, we crossed the sea, we traversed the wilderness, and arrived in the promised land of freedom. America offered a release from our long history of persecution, and we prayed that we might set aside the difficult and dark words that we Jews recite every Passover. Bechol dor vador omdim aleinu lachalotenu. In every culture, in every generation, they rise up and destroy us, try to destroy us. We believed in the promise of America, and then came Charleston, Charlottesville, Pittsburgh, Poway, Colleyville, our college campuses, and the streets of our major cities. It's clear that hate has returned with a vengeance. Anti-Semitism has resurfaced. Hate crimes against Jews in this country rose 150% last year, 57% in California. Incidents at schools K through 12 increased by 135%, and against Jewish institutions by 237%. For many Jews, this comes as a shock that someone hates us, someone who doesn't know us, who has never met us, has no idea who we are except for one thing, that we are Jewish. Walking on Sepulveda near the synagogue last year, someone stopped their car next to me, rolled down their window, and shouted that my yarmulke, my kippah, was ugly, just because I was a Jew. So what did we do? Who are these haters, and why now? If you haven't read Barry Weiss's book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, I would highly encourage you to do so. It will help you understand what we are facing. Anti-Semitism is a cultural virus. It's what one of my colleagues calls a protean hatred. It's incurable. It never goes away. It lies dormant for generations. But in moments of social stress or instability or change, it flares up when they no longer control their world, when they experience a dissonance between the way the world is and the way it ought to be. So they have two possible responses. They could ask, what should we do about this? And begin a process of self-criticism and self-improvement. That's what mature people do in free societies. Or alternatively, they could ask, who did this to us? Define themselves as victims as objects of sinister forces beyond their control and go looking for someone to blame. In Western civilization, this has classically been the Jews. But you see, this is not about us, and nothing we could change about ourselves, our behavior, our way of life could ease this. This is about the hater, the racist, the anti-Semite. It's fueled by the psychology the anti-Semite projects, his powerlessness projected into the picture of the Jew. He imagines the Jew as the avatar of all he most fears, the embodiment of all he deems evil. He fantasizes about all the superpowers we possess. The Jews, he will tell you, control the government, control the banks, control the media. Jews orchestrated the terror of 9/11 and COVID. Jews created ISIS. We are cast as characters in someone else's nightmare. There are those on the extreme right, for example, who hold the conviction that America is a white Christian nation. Real Americans, regular normal Americans, are white and Christian, and today this America is threatened. On the horizon, they see hordes of black and brown immigrants, armies of non-Christians, all coming to sully and dilute the purity of America. They see an organized conspiracy to replace white Christian America with an unrecognizable mixture of inferior races and strange beliefs, a conspiracy engineered and paid for by the devious Jews. We know the chant, "Jews will not replace us." And what is quite remarkable, many of the mass shooters of the last decade not only sought to carry out their evil plans, but in their spare time, they so often wrote about their hatred of which group? The Jews, even when we weren't the targets of the barrel of their gun. Disliking Jews is not anti-Semitism. It's human. We're all entitled not to like people. But when you deny Jews the rights that all peoples are entitled to be free and equal, that's anti-Semitism. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Criticism of Israel's government, challenging its policies and demanding that Israel live up to its ideals as a democratic Jewish state, advocating for the rights and freedoms of Palestinians, that is perfectly legitimate and not anti-Semitism. I want you to know that that kind of dissent has always been a part of the Zionist conversation. But on the America left, there are voices that demand human rights, an end to racism, an end to oppression, a redress of historical injustice and inequality. That is admirable, and that is what I stand for. But on the extreme left, voices go beyond this. What the Jew becomes for the anti-Semitic right, Israel and the Jews becomes for the anti-Semitic left. A fantasy, an archetype, a projection of evil. There are voices on the extreme left who perceive Israel as the last bastion of white European colonist imperialism. They accuse Israel of so many things, and of course it coming against an innocent native, non-European, non-white community. So born of this original sin, Israel is deemed the enemy of all that is good and progressive. Israel's very existence is an offense because some progressive circles see the word Zionist as a curse word. We've seen this over the past 2 years. And on most college campuses today, being pro-Israel is not okay. Under the banner of justice and righteousness, Israeli academics, journalists, artists, political leaders are shouted down and demonized. They claim they're not anti-Semites, they're only anti-Zionists. They say they love Jews, and they'll point to Jews who are a part of their movements. They raise the objection that legitimate criticism is being branded as anti-Semitic. So let this one rabbi here in Manhattan Beach maybe help a little. Let me say it again. Criticism of Israel's policies and practices is totally legitimate. We should all be heartbroken as to what is happening in Gaza and in the Middle East, and we should speak about it. But denying the right of Jews among the world's peoples to exist collectively as Jews, I believe that's anti-Semitism. Denying the right of Jews to define themselves as a nation and denying our long historical connection to the land of Israel, I believe that's anti-Semitism. Reducing the staggering complexity of the Israel-Palestine conflict to the single cause of Israel's doing, demonizing Israel as uniquely guilty for all the problems of the Middle East, I believe that's anti-Semitism. Calling out only Israel among all the nations of the world for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, calling out only Israel with a free press and an independent judiciary and a growing population of Muslims, calling out only Israel as the enemy of human rights in a world of Syria, North Korea, China, Sudan, Turkey, Iran, Russia, the Congo, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and so many more, that's not a call for justice. I believe that's anti-Semitism. And of course, not allowing Jewish students free passage to their classes, the library, the cafeteria, solely because they are Jewish, that's anti-Semitism. Our world, boy, it pains me greatly. And I'm sorry, this is the reality I had to share with you this morning. Imagine what my community could do if we didn't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on security. I'm so sorry that we have to teach our children to be careful and to be aware, but it is what we currently face. So how do we respond to this kind of hate? What I'm about to share is true for the Jewish people as well as all people. And it comes from Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, who gives us this beautiful thought. He teaches that when Moses brought the people of Israel to the Red Sea, and they heard the hoofbeats and war cries of Pharaoh's chariots pursuing them, according to a rabbinic teaching, they broke apart into 4 camps. One camp said, "Let's return to Egypt and serve the Pharaoh." Another camp said, "We must stand and fight the Egyptians." Another camp said, "Let's pray to God for redemption." And the 4th camp said, "We must move forward together." These are the same voices we hear today in both the Jewish community and in America. "Let's return to Egypt" is the voice of surrender. Accept the reality, recognize the inevitability of hate, fly low, make no waves, attract no attention. Some Jews believe they don't want us here, so we should find another place to live, another place to play, another place to work, another place to go to school. It's said the opposite of activism is silence. That's an ethic my Jewish ancestors learned over centuries to practice conscientiously. Maybe if we change, they thought, they'll change. Maybe if we assimilate, give up our distinctiveness, blend in, they'll come to accept us. But they didn't. They never do. Because their hatred is not affected by anything we do. It's not about what we do today. This approach is more subtle. It's expressed in the partial blindness that enables us to so clearly see the anti-Semitism and hate on the other side of the political divide, but not on our own. It allows those on the left to scream about dog whistles and nods to white supremacists by the right, while remaining deaf to the voices of vicious anti-Semitism and hate in their own house. And it allows those on the right to raise the alarm when the language of apartheid and the tool of boycott are deployed against Israel by the left without hearing the racist invective by their own. Anti-Semitism and hate must be called out wherever it lives, on my side, on your side, on all sides. Pretending not to hear, not to know, offering rationalizations, the yes, but, the well, you need to understand, those excuses only serve to enable and facilitate and reinforce the hate. It stops only when we say enough. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but during the Holocaust, as millions of Jews were being killed in Europe, American Jews knew exactly what was going on. And yet they didn't protest or scream because U.S. Jews were scared. They felt that if they stirred up too much trouble, they would be thrown out. My generation is different. I grew up almost every Sunday going to the Russian consulate in San Francisco and screaming at the top of my lungs to let Russian Jews go free. I'm so thankful that in my lifetime, I have seen the end of Jewish silence and the arrival of Jews into power. We have found our voice. We've assumed responsibility for our political destiny. We have learned the singular bitter lesson of the tragedies of the 20th century. No matter how nice we are, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop until we make them stop. And we're not going back to silence. We are not going back to Egypt. Out of the sea came another voice. Let's fight. Let's fight. That's so exciting. It's assertive, and it raises the adrenaline. It pushes back the fear. Yes, we'll fight, but fight what? And fight whom? As my colleague Rabbi Aaron Brusso says, there's a severe moral disease within people when they are threatened. When we are filled with the rage and righteousness of battle and ready to fight, what do? We turn on each other. We turn on our own. In the Jewish tradition, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the rabbis of the Talmud tried to piece together an explanation. How could this happen? How could we lose our land, our home, our city? How could God be exiled from the world? So they told a story. When the armies of Rome laid siege to Jerusalem, with an enemy literally at the gate, what did the Jews do? They fought among themselves. The great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai escaped the city and went to negotiate a peace with the Roman general Vespasian. And in the rabbi's telling of the tale, the Roman general asks him with astonishment, "What kind of people are you? You're fighting with one another. Can't you see what's in front of you?" The Talmud concludes sadly that Jerusalem was destroyed and God was exiled not by the might of the Roman armies, but by the uncontrolled, boundless hatred and rivalry we chose. Sinat chinam, they said. Because of boundless hatred and rivalry, Jerusalem was lost and God was exiled. Because of what we did to one another. There is an army at the gate again today in 2025. And once again, what do? We turn on each other. Instead of unifying as a common defense, the rise of anti-Semitism and hate for one another has become a wedge that breaks us apart. How many of you know families that can't sit together at a holiday table? How many of circles of friends have broken apart? One word, that's all it takes, has to be uttered. Trump, immigration, abortion, I could keep going. And instantly, bonds of family and ties of friendship, years of closeness, dissolve into screaming and shouting. Seamlessly, the language escalates. You're a racist. You're a traitor. It's screamed across the table. It's as if all the hate directed at us is hurled back at those that we should be closest to. All our frustration, all our rage is thrown at those who matter most to us. That's how God was exiled from the world. And we have to do something about it. And one of the best ways that we at CTJ have done something about it is by spending time with all of you, our friends from MBCC, learning from each other, finding common ground with each other, hearing each other. That is the best antidote to this divisive behavior. We can fight anti-Semitism and hate, but we have to remember that anti-Semitism and hate, it's not an insurgency, it's not an army, they are an idea, they are a narrative. And you fight a narrative through education. Education can change minds, but education requires patience and perseverance. You fight a narrative by presenting a different narrative, a narrative that supplants and undermines the hate. The first chief rabbi of Israel taught there's only one way to defeat boundless hatred, and that's with boundless love. That is the ultimate weapon in the fight against hate. Moses also heard other voices at the sea that said we must pray. Now, I'm all for prayer. Our traditions are all for prayer, except that a strange thing happens in the Torah at that point in the story. Standing before the sea, with his people crying around him and Pharaoh's armies pressing down upon them, Moses begins to pray. And according to the Torah, God responds to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward," God commands. Of all the moments, as the Israelites stood at the edge of oblivion with no escape, God says, "Stop praying." You see, there's a time for prayer and there's a time to move. There's a kind of prayer which moves us, and there's a kind of prayer which paralyzes us. When I pray, "God save me," I become helpless, frozen in place. I become passive and powerless. I relinquish responsibility for my condition, and I assume the role of the victim. Since this is the Jewish season for confessions, let me confess for a moment. There is something wonderful, strangely wonderful, in being a victim. As a victim, I command attention and demand the pity of others. I do it all the time at home. When I want to get out of doing the dishes or taking out the garbage, I use my past cancer diagnosis as a card to be the victim. As of the victim, we occupy some imaginary moral high ground. We can get mad and scream, "Look at what they did to me," and feel somehow superior. Jews, as you might know, are extremely good at the game of victimhood. I went to Hebrew school 4 days a week. Let me quickly describe my childhood Jewish education. I knew the words pogrom, ghetto, Holocaust, Inquisition, Nazi, before I knew the prayer over the wine. My timeline of Jewish history was Pharaoh, Haman, Antiochus, Titus, Hitler, Goering, Eichmann. Every week of Hebrew school, a new tyrant, a new atrocity. And after a while, I stopped listening. We all stopped. God says to Moses, "Moses, stop praying and move forward, because victimhood is a drug. It may temporarily lift us up, but it changes nothing in the world, and it leaves us with a terrible hangover." God says, "Stop praying and move forward because I took you out of slavery. I took you out of helplessness and powerlessness, and I won't let you crawl back." God says move forward because victimhood, just like silence and rage, is no identity. In victimhood, there is nothing to live for, to aspire to reach upward for. Rage and victimhood are all based on fear. Hiding from fear, punching back at fear, internalizing fear, but fear is no basis for commitment. Fear is no basis for passion. For that, you need love. Only love can launch a life of purpose. Silence, rage, victimhood are all defensive. A life of meaning must be created. Silence, rage, and victimhood all scream no, while a life worth living must begin with a yes. What we teach our children at CTJ is totally different than my education. It's a story not of what they did to us. It's not a Jewish story that's an endless nightmare of persecution, oppression, destruction, and Holocaust. Rather, it's a Jewish history about the communities we built despite the destruction. It's a history of the spiritual wisdom and the profound moral truth we discovered in spite of the persecution, of the ideals we uphold, the faith we sustain, the conviction we impart in the face of cruelty and brutality. We often sing a song at our synagogue which says it's our responsibility as God's partners to build a world of love and a world of kindness, and no hate can triumph over that dream if we don't let it. Unfortunately, for the foreseeable future, there will be armed guards at our building, but there will be a powerful wisdom learned within it. And while a guard might check your bag the next time you come to visit us, once inside, we promise that you will have a life-changing experience full of celebration, learning, joy, and meaning. Our synagogue in October will be celebrating its 100th birthday. No hate is going to stop us from reaching our centennial and the hundreds of years beyond that. Together, as Jews and as Christians, hand in hand, it's my prayer that we will create a world of celebrating our differences, learning from our disagreements, and bringing God into special moments of meaning. Thank you for helping us navigate this difficult but beautiful world we couldn't do without you. Thank you.